So, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, actually, and a nice hot afternoon in which to discuss a hot subject like theatre. Uh, we have been given a title: Reimagining Indian Theatre, Bridging the Gap Between Tradition and Modernity. That's the subtitle. So now I'm privileged to sit next to three important practitioners in the Indian theatre ecology, who are all from Kerala and who have all contributed immensely to the reimagining of Indian theatre, and in fact, uh, taking it out of a regional context and be and shining at the national stage. You have Roysten Abel, you have Abhilash Pillai, and you have Nimmy, Raphel. I won't waste time in too many introductions because they're already very well known. But I think we'll get straight to the topic. Uh, this whole idea of creating a title with this what are called binaries: tradition, modernity. It's a binary, as if they are exact opposites. And you can phrase it differently. You can call it tradition and modernity. You can call it tradition or modernity. You can call it tradition versus modernity. You can call it tradition qua modernity. So there are many ways of looking at this, but uh, it's like imagining tradition and modernity as two watertight compartments, which are not porous, which don't have any fuzzy borders, which are absolutely well defined, and they remain in their separate orbits. And I think that's probably a bit of a superstition. I don't think life works like that. I don't think any art form works like that. There are lots of what in Malayalam is called Kodukkalum Mangalum. There's a lot of give and take that happens, and it's going to be futile to think that these can be seen as isolated systems, and often the connotation that is made when we use the word modernity. I work with modern theatre. When someone talks like that, the connotation is that modernity has effectively annihilated, completely killed, completely extinguished any vestige of tradition, and that's increasingly being taken for granted and increasingly being set up as a contestation, which again I think is a futile exercise. And also, we talk about both tradition and modernity in singulars: tradition, modernity. We don't say traditions and modernities because, in fact, that is what really the scenario is, where there are multiplicities, where there are diversities, where there are pluralities, where there are amplifications of each of those concepts. And recently there have been some very critical theoretical propositions by people like Boris Groys, etc., which says that a revolution can actually mean a return to the past. It's a play on the word revolution can be a return to the past, and to recover certain humanistic content left behind in the past societies, in the past systems. He quotes Walter Benjamin, for example, one of the great theoreticians of modern times, of looking at the past from an inverse perspective, where you don't look from the past to the future, but you look from the future back into the present and the past, and in one sense, therefore, destroy those barriers and destroy those singularities. Now, what we're going to do here is I'll ask all the three panelists to speak a little bit about their own work, about how they have grappled with this issue. Royston has been a practitioner on a national and international scale, creating highly spectacular kind of theatrical products, but he puts together an immense number of elements which come from a modernist thinking, but with a background uh, in fact, a rootedness in some sort of traditional experience, amalgam of multiple forms and multiple disciplines, which includes visual, oral, the electronic, and so on and so forth, and working with a large number of people on stage, which includes both those who are on stage and those who are backstage, creating some extraordinary sets and so on. So that will be one kind of experience. Abhilash also comes from a similar background, having worked in the National School of Drama, being a product of the NSD. Also, both of them are products of the NSD. And Abhilash then has moved into teaching over the last several years, first in Delhi and now in Thrissur. And there, I'm sure he encounters a very specific set of, let's say, challenges when it comes to teaching theatre in our times to young boys and girls who come from distinct backgrounds, who need to be trained in a particular kind of theatre, which we don't know. When NSD was started way back in 1960-61, Al-Qazi being the director, I think the role they saw themselves as playing was much more clear, that we want to create a national theatre. But as time passed on, we have seen that idea disappearing. We have seen a very interesting atomization of this idea of national theatre. It's been dispersed across the country. There are now very, very specific language theatres in India, many of which reach the national stage and create their own impact. One of them is the kind of theatre practiced by Nimmy, Raphel and Vinay Kumar under the guidance and tutelage of Veena Pani Chawla in Pondicherry at Adi Shakti. Again, paying huge attention to training, but from the initial stages, taking the training material, the physical exercise and the physical preparation of the actor from a very traditional base, whether it's Kodiyatam or other Kalari or other forms. So you have three distinct experiences here. Nimmy is an actor, she's a performer, she's also directed her own play recently, which has made a spectacular impact on the Indian stage. So I'll let them speak about their work, keeping in mind this little contest between tradition, modernity, and the way it is placed before us, the way it is presented before us as if they're opposites, but actually, when you see their work, you realize that those oppositions are not necessarily valid, that we actually don't need to make a bridge, that there in fact, a dissolution has happened and pathways have opened up on their own. Wonderful to have a butterfly pass by. So, Roysten, shall we begin with you?
I have had a training in Kalamandalam where I actually learned Mohiniyattam and Kuchipudi for several years. And I think through that practice, certain stories of tradition and how you converse with tradition is something that you can't escape. But I think my real conversation with tradition and mythology happened when I came to Adishakti. And at this point, I see traditional knowledge and mythology as knowledges which you can look into specifically. Because I usually right now I feel tradition is like a word. Word is an amalgamation of so many experiences that has come into something that we define as word, and it is different for many people as to how you use them. And I think tradition is also like that for me. It's an individual conversation that one could have, where it's a knowledge system. These knowledge systems are in one very specific way where you can take the things that you want and separate them, understand them with the context that you're grappling with right now. And that also offers a certain kind of freedom for you to move in and out. And I think that is what is right now tradition for me. It is a system of knowledge. Well, it has its problem depending on how you look at it. But I think from a practitioner's point of view, it has a lot that you can actually take out. And I think the key remains in having the conversation. Sometimes when we talk about tradition, because it's also very much connected to religion, we somehow deny ourselves of having that conversation. But I think as a practitioner, it offers that freedom for me to have the conversation, to go into details, which it offers me the freedom to take what I want, question what I want. And I think that is where the strength lies in. And I think our information, our knowledge for the future will come from our past experiences. And myth and tradition offers that, because it is also built around a system, built around experiences. And I think it has to be a conversation. It has to be a conversation as to how you look at tradition, what you want to get out of it. And it most often is a kind of hook which enables you to take the knowledge out. And I think that is where I stand when it comes to tradition and its knowledge.
Yeah, now that's interesting, how do you say, position, tradition as a knowledge system. This then always poses a bit of a problematic. Do we understand tradition then as, I'm using the word in a as yet in an unproblematized way. Tradition is a very problematic word, but I'm not going into that at the moment. But just to respond and make Nimmy speak a bit more, uh, is tradition something that is a chest of drawers, a wonderful chest of curiosities, a magic well into which every time we find the modern impulse drying up, we dip into it, take something we want from it, and then let it rot or simmer or fester or whatever in its own place. So, is it something that you are using uh, in a instrumental way, or is there any other way of approaching that?
Well, it is everything that you are saying, and it is also not that. And I think for a practitioner, it is constantly to nature oneself with the knowledge system that we actually have in our disposal. uh, I think I would be more curious to have a conversation with tradition and knowledge system than completely negate it altogether, because I literally do see it as a knowledge system. Now, depending on where you are in one's life and the context that you are living in and the issues that you are grappling with, I think there are also answers or questions that you can oppose by having that conversation. And I think having a conversation is the most valid point of view for me. So I don't see it as something that, when I need something, I go and take it. I think I have never been away from tradition because I've always been in conversation with it. And I think that gives me more as a practitioner, as a person who wants to write relevant contextual things for myself. It gives me that freedom than to completely negate or just to see it as a treasure trove of things. It is a contradictory thing, I feel, and I think that's where the beauty lies for me.
Yeah, good. So we'll start from that. It is a conversation that needs to be engaged in. But it's also clear for me, personally, that the word tradition is a rather recent invention, probably of the 20th century or the late 19th century. And in the Indian context, it has come to be closely associated with the idea of nationalism. In some sense, it's a subterfuge to hide the nationalist intention and the very majoritarian intention often. And it's gone on like that. It's been challenged once in a way, but not too often. We all know for a fact that traditions like Bharatanatyam, traditions like Kuchipudi, traditions like Odissi, and this kind of so-called classical traditions are hardly 80 years old, 70 years old, but we give it a huge ancestry, 5,000 years, 8,000 years, etc., just for our convenience, because it helps a nationalist cause. It worked well during the national movement because it was necessary to show that we were better than the colonists and all that. But post-independence, these have been set up in a almost an oppositional way to decry every other subaltern culture and every other practice across the country and so on. So I'll ask Abhilash to respond to this. And
Uh, yeah, listening to Sadanand and Nimmy. Also, while reading this topic the first time when it was sent to me, I just remembered an example which was happening in National School of Drama. I would like to just share it here. It's like Roy and myself, we have gone through those inputs in it. And it is one of those uh, productions where we have to go to a region and we have to leave National School of Drama. This was basically conceived by B.V. Karanji's time when B.V. Karan was the director of National School of Drama. So he made it sure, because all the students who are coming from all different backgrounds and from different traditions and from different languages in National School of Drama, and then they are pushed to um, create something in the verbal language known as Hindi, which is whatever the Indian state or like Indian as a nation would like to have as a national language. So, and in that, Karanji made it sure that all the students of a batch should go back into under any one guru or any one tradition to a village or to a town, and then and learn the whole whatever the form is, the performance form, and the performance form, and in that performance form, whatever you are like, for example, Ankya Natya or anything, and then develop a play with a director who is the word modern, who has got theater educated, with a guru and with the practitioners. Students are getting prepared, and then they perform in the region, and then they will come back and perform in a city like Delhi. So this was an exercise which was happening for quite a long time. And teachers also, like all of us, we were of the impression that the batch changes. There is something which happens when for this input when students go, and then we can see the change in the body, the change in. But there was one particular batch in 2005-6. They simply questioned us back in the Viva when all the faculties were sitting. What are we actually doing in this exercise? We are going there for a month, and we are trying to learn this form, and then we develop a kind of a production which is whatever is called as modernist production, and then we travel in that particular region only with broken Hindi, broken other language, because that language, it has its own language there. And then we come back and do it, and this student in a simple language asked, what is the difference between what and like the word which they told was choli ke piche kya hai is the song, which was a copy which was taken by the Bollywood, and the copyright was also taken by. So what are we doing other than this in this particular form? Are we not appropriating it rather than what is it which we are trying to make it? And then there was this large question which came: is modernism is about systems, methods, and processes, how we discover, or what happens with it? Or is it about really performing in the traditional form is what it is? Or is it the way how we look into it, or how we try to make a dialogue with it? Isn't it that what is actually supposed to happen? Isn't it the collaborations which are much more important? Isn't it like we perform together rather than one learning the other thing and forcing oneself to learn and saying that this is tradition, and then only you become validated or authentic as an Indian performer in a modern theater, is something which was questionable. And I just thought I should share this because this was a thing. And then later that particular I mean, still it is going on, and it's been taken by the centers in National School of Drama. They also keep doing this thing. But there's a very strong question which happens with how traditions are taught in a modern drama school and how it has been brought into the practice. This is something which I just thought I should share and put it here.
I think that's a very interesting point, and just to expand on that a bit, it might be interesting to look at the experience of one of India's leading theatre practitioners who passed away a decade ago, Habib Tanvir. Habib Tanvir went to study in the Royal College of Drama in London, And then on his way back to India, he stopped in Berlin and worked with the Berliner ensemble of Bertolt Brecht. So one is classical British theatre. Then he's working with a kind of a radical German theatre. And then when he comes back to India, the first thing he does, the first play he performs is called Mritchakatikam. Sudhaka's Mritchakatikam. And he learns Sanskrit and he learns the Natya Shastra. And he realized that what he had learnt from the European context wasn't giving him the material, giving him the whatever the fuel that was necessary to address audiences here. Then he decided to do what Abhilash was describing, go into a rural area. And he, of course, came from Raipur, which is now the capital of Chhattisgarh. And he was familiar with certain local forms there, performers from the Nacha tradition who sing and dance and act and so on, brilliant performers. And he gives them scripts that he has written himself in some kind of Hindi, some kind of pure Hindi, if you want to call it, or Urdu, mixture of Hindi and Urdu, Hindustani. And they perform for almost 5-6 years. They keep performing. And Habib keeps feeling that I'm a failure. I'm not able to reach my audience. They're not understanding because the actors are not natural on stage. That actors feel very constrained and they're not able to produce their best. And then one day it strikes him when he was relaxing after a rehearsal. In one corner, 5 or 6 of his actors, men and women, started performing something on their own in their own language, in their own tribal Chhattisgarhi language. And then it came like a click like that in his mind that I am constraining them by imposing a certain kind of language and a certain kind of theatre practice on them. And then he decided to free it up. So from that time on, all his plays, Charan Das, Chor, those absolutely iconic plays, became the experiment for attempting something like this, attempting recovery of a space that seemed to be lost in modern theatre. So it's interesting that you mentioned this formal exercise in NSD. Royce?
So, listening to all this, it just took me back about 25 years. And so this is like way back, and I used to do Shakespeare, and then like proper Shakespeare, because I had apprentice with the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford-upon-Avon, and I came back and very, very different, but I had a similar experience when I was apprenticing also with Cheek by Jowl and Theatre de Complicity in London. And Simon McBurney told me that the one play that he was influenced by to create the kind of work he was doing was, by the way, Habib Tanvir. It's crazy. Anyway, so I came back, and so we were doing, and there was some strange kind of contradiction in my head, or I don't know what. So we decided to do, I was experimenting with Shakespeare and new writing. And the first line that my play, Othello, a play in black and white, we start the play with, but then the first line of the play is, because I'll give you a background, because the story is about an Italian director coming to India and wanting to work with Indian actors, and thereby she wants to use Kathakali in a contemporary play. And my first line in that play was, why the fuck do we have to do this play in Kathakali? And then we explore these questions in various ways. But to cut the story short, one of the reasons why I wanted to use Kathakali was the last scene of Othello killing Desdemona. When, it is the cause, my soul. And there was no way I wanted to do a naturalistic version of Othello strangling Desdemona on stage, given whatever, whether it is the poetics or Natya Shastra. And I just took this and I just told Adil Hussain, who played Othello, to why don't you go and learn the mudras for the scene along with the lines with Sadanand Balakrishnan. And he came back and then he started doing these things for me from the rehearsals. And I'm like looking at it and I'm thinking, wow, this is just amazing. This just takes the scene to another level altogether. So as it is with Shakespeare, with this heightened realism, you need to have actors who can do things with more than just, the repertoire, the naturalistic or the realistic repertoire an actor could have. And we did that. And for me, it was just that the magic happening while this actor was actually performing on stage. So that's where it all started. But that was a very, very small thing. I mean, whatever, it's been 25 years now. It's 25 years of Othello. It was one of my very, very successful productions. But then what really changed my whole thing was this friend of mine, Rajiv Sethi. He took me to this slum in Delhi called Shadipur Depot, which at that time housed about 1,500, 1,600 families of artists and artisans, out of work street performers. And he never told me that he was taking me there, and he had prepared all of them because he had a trust which was working with them called the Bhule Bisra Trust, and he had it all arranged. And as soon as I got out of my car, there were these impersonators, the Behrupias, who started performing, and then there were the street magicians and street acrobats and street jugglers and the puppeteers and snake charmers and all of these people who were performing for their life. The tenacity with which they were performing, they were doing it for their life. So it was not about whether they were doing traditional magic or they were doing traditional jugglery or they were doing traditional things. They were actually performing for their life because they thought something is going to come out of this meeting with me. And that's exactly what they do on the streets, because when they're performing on the streets, they have to get that money out of the audience who are watching it, so that they can go and burn the fire in their house that night. Like they say, when you speak to them, they will tell you that, for us, we have to, in Hindi it says, पानी पीने के लिए रोज कुआं कूदना पड़ता है. Every day we need to dig a well for us to drink water. So their performance was like, it was so engaging. So for me, this question of tradition and all that did not just exist at that point. I just saw the tenacity of these performers, which was, for me at that point, non-existent in contemporary actors. Because for contemporary actors, there was the actor audience, whatever they've learned, they are trying to execute, trying to make a connection. But over here, the connection had to be made if they had to have a meal that night. So that's what actually got me into the traditional India. And I actually started loving it for the basic reason that they had skill, which the contemporary actor was struggling to have, because and then I started working with various folk communities. I still work with the Manganiyars, and again, what I just saw there was, you see, with the Manganiyars again. Now, this is a very poor community, and they survived all these years because if they had to please the king. to get something for them to survive for a year. If the king would have an annual darbar, and and the king would have everybody. They would have musicians from the Lucknow Gharana, from the Allahabad Gharana. You would have from the Delhi Gharana. You would have all of them. They would have Drupad. They would have Khayal. They would have Tappa. They would have, all these people. And then they would be the Manganiyars. Now the Manganiyars, unless they bloody overpowered all of them, there was no way he was going to survive for the rest of the year. So what the Manganiyars did was, he took a bit of Khayal, he took a bit of Tappa, he took a bit of Drupad, he did all that, and then they started creating their own thing just for survival. And you can see it in their music. And that is what excited me. And then now there are only a few things that I can do. Because I'm trained in a particular way, and so I think in a particular way, and in terms of creating a production. So then I create a narrative from the basic training I have, but then I use this skill. I don't mind using the word use, because it's just there for the taking. And then what happens later is something, is different, because then you start trying to create larger experiences for a variety of audiences. And those experiences are unique by itself, which the audience hasn't experienced, and they need to experience it, is what I feel, because these are experiences that I wanted to experience myself. And I kind of do it. I still do it. I just did my new production called Beetroot, and it had the Chanda players and the Mirav players from Kerala, Chanda, Elathalam, Mirav. I had a Nagada player from Central Rajasthan. Then I had my Manganiyars, and then I had Ranjit Barot, who was A.R. Rahman's drummer. I mean, more than A.R. Rahman's drummer, he's John McLaughlin's collaborator. And we had, for the first time, tried to experiment with hardcore electronic music and traditional folk instruments, and just to see where it would take us. And it just takes us to newer and newer places. And I just love experiencing and visiting these new places metaphorically with my art. And that's where I am with this. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Roysten, for that. But these are let's say, the overpowering contradictions of our experiences, and what history does to it, what our changing times, what we call modernity, does to it. For example, the story of the Langas and Manganiyars, Abhilash also touched on it. The fact that their repertoire, their what is it called, non-copyrighted, but their original material, whether it's Choli Ke Piche Kya Hai, whether it's Nimbuda, all these things get appropriated in a modernist system by a technological form called cinema, which is much more powerful than theatre at the moment. And suddenly it becomes a box office hit, and across the country, everybody is humming it, everybody knows these songs. And I had this unfortunate experience when from the Asian College of Journalism in Chennai, when we had invited the Langas and Manganiyars to perform in a big auditorium in Chennai. They came, a very big group came, a smashing performance. But when they started singing Nimbuda, the whole audience booed them, saying, "Oh, you've stolen it from cinema." So it's their material which has been stolen by cinema, which now when they play, it becomes stolen material in their case. So it's a very interesting reversal that is happening in our times, of which often we are not aware. We pick up something, we use it, and suddenly in a global context, it's taken on a different meaning. And this is I think the interesting. That's what I'm saying. It's a very slippery area between tradition and modernity, and
But in theatre, I mean, at least with the productions I do, we don't appropriate their music at all.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about.
But this is. I mean, it's so sad that
this is my response to Rajiv Sethi. No.
No, but even Nimbuda, I mean, it's so sad that the Chennai audiences did not know that Nimbuda was actually a tune lifted by Sanjay Leela Bansali from the Manganiyars, because everybody knows with the Manganiyars that it is their own tune.
Now they know because it's been written about. I have written quite a lot about it. So now they know. But at that point, this was around the year 2002 or something, soon after Talkit. So anyway, this is a process that's happening in a very interesting way, where this is what I'm calling the give and take that is happening in our context, where we live a certain kind of an urban life. 400 million middle class in India, 40 crores out of 140 crore middle class. What about the remaining 100 crore? So the 40 crore in one sense parasites on that 100 crore in various ways, on their labor, on their creativity, on their artisanal qualities. All these things have been built by one of those 100 crores, etc., etc. So that's a different debate. But the dominant discourse of national identity approaches the cultural past, whatever that cultural past is. It could be immediate, it could be older, etc. Only is able to approach it only in a reactionary way, unfortunately. It only uses the past to reinforce its own power in the present. And that's been a particular distorting intervention that nationalism has done in India. So when we say we have to recover tradition, I think we also have to remember that there are multiple traditions. There are not just reactionary traditions, there are also revolutionary traditions. There are things that have happened in the past which are so modern and so relevant for our times, which can be very, very useful. This is true in the kind of work that Adi Shakti does, the kind of work that both of you do, where you recover material. It's not just, I mean, appropriation is a context, but which is in the commercial context. But there is a recovery of material as a process that is happening, which needs to be acknowledged. But it also needs to, for audiences like this, we need to be able to clarify what that process of recovery is. How do you go at it step by step without just parachuting down and taking something? So, would you be able to? Would you answer?
Yeah, but I don't think it's about parachuting down and taking out something. I think it's like it's really engaging with someone. I mean, or with the tradition. I mean, I don't even look at it. I just look at it. For me, it's all about people and the people who are, strangely a part of a tradition. But it's the people, and then you are engaging with them, and by engaging with them, fortunately, unfortunately, we are from two different traditions. I mean, they come from somewhere else, I come from somewhere else, or and then when we both engage, there is A plus B is equal to C.
No, tell us the word that Nimmy used. What is the conversation that happens?
The conversation is the conversation of trying to understand each other. And so when that conversation happens, there is a third thing that gets born out of this conversation. And that is the most exciting part. And not trying to distort his dialogue or my dialogue. His dialogue remains the same, my dialogue remains the same. But then, when we both speaking, do we arrive at something that we haven't experienced before? And that's the challenge. And the experience is hence very ephemeral. It's not as if I know what I want and I try to get that out of that person. It's a total work in progress. Mangania Seduction has been playing for 24 years and it's still a work in progress.
Okay, no, I would like to just respond in terms of how, like, what I have been trying with working with the circus, and because with the circus artists or with the circus companies in India, to respond to Roy's propositions which he was giving here. Because what happens, there are a lot of under-table dealings of circus companies and how they move in the periphery, and they are always vulnerable communities in terms of there are many kind of I think exploitations which happens within the circus company by the proprietors, and having this done, but at the same time looking and I have now I have done two of the projects, two productions, and
What made you go to a circus?
sorry.
What made you choose circus as a form?
No, this is something which I was telling. This kind of dialogue which had come to me about in a way how a certain input was appropriating traditions in terms of, like, we studied this and now we know about this, is something which is like 15 years, 16 years of training, and for a month you go and study something. Or that's what I was at that's one of the things. And right from my childhood I was very much interested into circus as something which used to always engage me, because I have been growing in all different states, because my parents were central government employees, and I have been exposed to most of the folk forms and traditional forms right from the childhood, because my father was he was working for the INB Ministry for the Culture, but I could only see one common factor which engaged me always was circus in my childhood. And that's why I thought I should take up circus at some point. Even though in the folk forms and traditional forms, there are many things which used to engage me. But myself and my sister childhood, we used to always think every day evening we have to go and see a performance, because it was song and drama division, and it was after independence. That there were so many forms, like Rajasthan had all these forms which has to be registered, and then they have, and whatever exchange programs are, like that's how I think the first it was part of the nation making exercise, registering all these forms and then arranging their tour from one state to another state, and having this Indian Mela and all those stuffs. So we were part of that. Our childhood was part of that. And circus was one thing which we were always interested in as children. And otherwise, traditional forms, there was something which was very interesting, something in which we used to sleep off. We could never relate to that form. So that's why I picked up circus to work after working with a lot of different kinds of modern theater, which I still am doing. But circus was my interest was that which was coming into. Now, taking circus, it was different when I saw in the childhood, which was also the golden era, which was being told as 60s, 70s, 80s, where there were a lot of Russian circus visits and Chinese circus visits, and the kind of collaborations which had happened. But now coming down to circus, while collaborating with circus artists, there are many different kinds of dialogues which still doesn't keep working. And we are still trying. The first show which we made, we did it in this beach only. It was hooted and howled. It was not taken by the audience. And then we have to slowly make that dialogue. And now why it was happening? It was because of the kind of a certain sense of modernism, which was also pushed into the circus. I think in these, it was opened here only in Calicut Beach. And we could never understand the kind of audience which were coming for circus, and it went into the place where, and it was a collaboration between students and circus artists together. The second one we did, circus artists also performed and students also performed, and students did the clowning and other things which are more related with theater, and circus artists really performed, and we wanted to make it is still the second one which we made was Talatam, which was a kind of an adaptation of Tempest, Shakespeare's, and that also was there in Serendipity, in which the first one we collaborate with a circus company. The second one was we took all individuals from different places and made a company by itself. So there were street artists to professional artists to somebody whom we picked from India Got Talent and all those things, and then we made a narrative, and we could bring in. That show worked, but never moved on because it was too heavy to move on. Because a circus company has nearly 25 trucks moving. It's like a mini village which moves from one place to another with animals, children, and all those things. And so similarly, with the Serendipity project, it was very heavy to move on. Then the next one is now we are trying to make, where we are into the making of it. And because it takes also some years to bring all these people and then put it together and then to make it. So what I am trying to say is this: Roy has been successfully able to do something. For me, it is still a big challenge and a struggle. That dialogue is something which is just not happening, but still trying. That is okay.
I I must say that I'm still figuring what my relationship with tradition and how I do my theater. I at this point it is really is a collaborative work between a person who has a certain body of traditional work and with a person who would probably make their living out of tradition. And what I see right now is the traditional performer's body as a living archive. By that, I would mean that it's not static. Usually, when we say tradition, we feel that it is frozen, it doesn't grow, it's just there somewhere. But I, as a practitioner who's also a performer on stage, I like to see it as a living archive. And that would immediately give me the freedom to have certain insight. And I think that comes from the way the traditional performer would use their body, the way they make their work. And it also offers me certain freedom, which is that a traditional performer does not need a set in order to transform the space. A traditional performer does not require your approval as to how they are how you are watching their form. They're very confident in what they do, and I think that is something for me to take. So when I say there is a conversation involved, I don't mean that you cut something and then you copy paste into something. That's not what I mean. I mean, by being collaborative, there are certain things that you can take. The confidence that the traditional performer has in their body is something that the contemporary performer can certainly learn from. And that would mean that you are not taking their language onto the stage where it becomes your playground. What you're literally doing is you're training in tradition, because there is certain discipline, there is certain craft that the contemporary performer can actually learn from, but you are reimagining your body as well as how they reimagine their body. And I think that is where my collaboration is really, and I'm still grappling with it. I have not found anything that is very concrete, which is the reason why I say it is like a word, isn't it? We assign a meaning to a word, but if you were to look at it the other way around, it could have been amalgamation of so many experiences which we say as a word. So for me, tradition is that I don't have to give it a meaning, I don't have to give it a certain structure. It is open for me, and I have to keep it open in order for me to have that conversation. I have to be slightly foolish in order to ask the questions which would rekindle my imagination. And I think that's where I am with tradition. So I don't see it as a frozen thing, I see it as a living archive, living systems of knowledge, living systems of meaning, which is still growing in a performer's body. And I think that is where I would like to place myself, because I, I have two different side. I am also a performer on stage, and I'm also a person who is trying to grapple my writing and direction. So I think it offers me that freedom of reimagination, the freedom of what a form could do. They would just do, the hand just moves and it's a totally different place. And we, unlike in cinema, you won't believe it, if a hand moves like that of a performer, you can never tell the audience that you are in a different place. But the traditional performer gives you that freedom, that the hand moves and you're in a completely different space altogether. And I think that's the freedom that I would like to take from tradition. And I think that's the reimagining that I would like to go as a performer and as a person who's trying to grapple with what it is that is still not very revealing for me.
Yeah, lovely. And if I were if you permit me to speak a little bit on your behalf and what Adi Shakti has been doing, particularly Nimmy's work, uh, it's a modernist activity which could, along with the word archiving, it could also be called indexing. So, for example, you take a old text called the Ramayana, and you look at that text and try to source from it how many times has the word sleep been used, and who all are sleeping in the story, in the narrative, which all characters have the luxury of sleep, which characters have to keep awake, which characters have to keep watch. So you index it, and then from those indexations you source something. So, for example, you work with Nidra Uttam or with Urmila, which juxtaposes a woman's sleeplessness with a Kumbhakarna's sleep. And that is a completely modern project. It's like taking the narrative and pirchifying it, as they say in Tamil, separating it and picking up threads and then joining it again, making a completely new tapestry and a completely new text. So I think that's a fabulous project as a textual as well as a performative project.
I just want to add into the sleep and sleeplessness, and I think, see, the thing is, we talk about our political rights and we are very vocal about it, but we somehow feel that we don't have to talk about our personal rights, and I think sleep is a very fundamental and personal right. And I think in the current times that we live in, how many of us feel that the sleep that we have to sleep is our own? It's also dictated by an outside agency, and I think that is that's the context that Urmila works from, which is the new work that Adishakti is doing right now. Who does your sleep belong to? And I think it mostly does belong to your employer. And we don't like to see them as a Lakshmana, or we don't like to see them as anybody else, because it's not imposed very directly on us. And I think these are the questions that and obviously this actually comes from the myth. It is there for you to take. It's also how you read it, which is also the reason why I feel tradition is also how you look at it. What is the kind of conversation and collaboration that you want to have with it? And I think that's where it doesn't have to be specifically saying this or that. It could be both. And that the freedom to keep that conversation open.
Thank you. So I've been getting several nods from this side that we need to wind up. We're running short of time. There's a time crunch. So I'd quickly conclude by suggesting that the role of the contemporary artist is a bit like the role of all of you must have read spy thrillers of the Cold War era, where the stories were replete with double agents, someone who works both for CIA and for KGB, and so on and so forth. So the artist today is somewhere in that position where you have to work for the present, of course, but also work for the past in a very responsible way, where the past is brought to the fore in a manner which does not create confusion in the present, or the possibility of any kind of appropriation in the present. So thank you very much, the three of you. But now we are opening to the floor, and if there are questions, maybe we got how many minutes? 5 minutes? 10 minutes?
Hi, my name is Shankar. I'm an assistant professor at Christ. Largely influenced by the very pessimistic idea of Benjamin, as Sadanand sir has introduced. But I'm just trying to place the past in the present, where in a very slippery stage like the dwelling between tradition and modernity, they still was people who did not really give a damn about this tradition or modernity or perhaps theatre itself, but they were theatre practitioners. And I'm precisely coming up to the name of Ramachandran Mogeri. So he was not a institutionalized, or he was a man-made, self-made man. But such kind of people are perhaps reducing in the theatre now. So future definitely. So how do you all, perhaps you all know Mogeri Mash also. So how do you think of a present or a future without people like Mogeri emerging? Or if so, what do we have to do to get more Mogeris for the future?
Okay, I have studied under Mugere sir, and he is my teacher. To be very frank, this circus was something. For the first time I started, it was from one of his classes only, because I went and I knew, because this was the theater of roots time in School of Drama. And everything, whatever gets validated, if you'll do in that vocabulary. If you even do realism, it doesn't get validated unless and until it has some theater of root. And Mugeri sir was something who used to always doesn't see that from that point of view only, and he always had a kind of an stopgap relationship with roots as such. And that's something, because when I was studying in School of Drama, I also had this problem. I am not a pure Malayali in terms of talking, in terms of writing, because I've been born and brought up in many places. So I had that difficulty, and my classmates and everything. So where are your roots? Is been asked, and this is something which I used to ask Mugeri sir. Where are my roots? And he used to say, "You yourself is your roots. Don't get into those discussions." This is how it used to. And this is the time when one of his classes was about what is the interest, because circus was never taken as Indian traditions. It had a very corrupt tradition. If you see, it doesn't. It's an urban form in a way. There are people who would say it's an urban form. It has all mixed things. It has African traditions. It has all many things into it. And that's why circus was never taken as the part of roots movement or anything. And to be very frank, circus doesn't come under culture ministry only. Circus comes under sports ministry, even today in the government of India. So they don't get any funds. They don't have anything to apply. So all those things, because in sports you need competition, then only they'll get anywhere, or they'll reach anywhere. So they don't get even the value or validity of an artist anyway, even though they are risking their life to the hell. The way how they perform things, and without any safety nets. And so these are things which I thought it was an inspiration from these kind of classes and lectures, from where one could start something like this. And I would say, yeah, we are missing Mugeri sir of personalities like that, who could even, because the last project which he did, in the It Folk, he performed one of them, his performances. And because I was I was a director of that one, and we were, because that was the It Folk in which we went in collaboration with police, because it is street theater, and we knew there are many street interventions will happen, and there could be frustrations in the public. There could be huge crowd which can come into. So we had a lot of meetings with district collectors and everything, so that we make this happen in Thrissur. Street theater, not street plays, street theater. And you will believe it or not, I think if you're there, Mugeri sir was the most difficult one, because it was like, you come and arrest, then I'll stop the show. It was that kind of a stand of an artist. If not, the show will go on. And that's how it was. And we were also worried that what will happen by the end of the show, and the way how people and public joined with him, and the whole Thrissur round, how it got evoked. So this is something we are missing people like that now in theatre very much.
Yeah, and I guess this notion of a it's a Gramscian idea, the organic intellectual, the organic performer, the organic artist. You could have seen what Abhilash was describing if you had gone to Cubbon Park during the time Badal Sarkar used to do those absolutely spontaneous, highly psychological plays, and surrounded by 400, 500, 600 people in the open. So these are, but psychological plays that were political in nature, which touched people's modes of responding to immediate crisis. So this is something that you cannot really plan or create. It emerges. It emerges from the soil. If there is a soil for theatre, such individuals will certainly emerge.